though obviously paralyzed from the waist down.
You dishonor your heritage and your weapon, Jedi.
Wendell managed to say.
You could have used the Force to compel us to do as you wished. I've not only seen that, but experienced it.
The Mune's face contorted in distaste. If you've so little will, he said in the tongue of Wendell's species, then you're of no use to me, Klatooinian, and ended Wendell's misery with a click of his thumb and middle finger. Gradually, the spray from the ceiling abated, and the klaxons fell silent. His examinations completed, the Mune stood and turned slowly to the droid. What name do you respond to?
114D, sir.
Can you pilot this ship, 114D?
I can, sir.
The droid paused and asked,
Do you wish me to relocate the survivors to medbay or jettison any of the corpses?
The Mune surveyed his handiwork. Leave them. He shrugged out of his sodden robe and hung it over a chair, revealing a second lightsaber affixed to his belt. Captain La remarked that you have medical capabilities.
I do, sir.
Turning his back to 114D, the Mune stripped his blood-stained tunic from his distended lower back. Are you capable of repairing this? The droid sharpened the focus of its photoreceptors and olfactory senses.
The wound shows signs of infection and putrefaction, sir, but yes, I can repair.
The Mune lowered the tunic and retrieved a comlink from a pocket in the robe. Activating the device, he spent a moment inputting data, then turned the display so that 114D could read it. Set a course for these coordinates, then attend to me in the captain's quarters.
Anything else, sir?
Prepare food and drink. I'm famished. With the Wobegon traveling through hyperspace, Plagueis lay prone on the captain's bunk, a Bacta patch covering the wound on his back, contemplating the results of his attempts to prolong the lives of those crew members who had survived the altercation. Even where he had been successful in effecting repairs to damaged blood vessels and organs, the results had been temporary, as he had not been able to influence or appeal to the midichlorians to assist. Calling on the Force to mend ruptured arteries, torn muscle, or broken bone was no more difficult than levitating slabs of stone. But such refurbishments had little effect on a being's etheric shell, which was essentially the domain of the midichlorians, despite their physical presence in living cells. Among the ship's crew, the Togruta, Captain La, had been the strongest in the Force, but she was beyond his help by the time he reached her. Had it not been for sloppiness on his part, owing to fatigue and blood loss, and lightning-fast reflexes on hers, the lightsaber might simply have pierced her neck and cervical spinal cord. But she had spun at the moment of impact, and the crimson blade had all but decapitated her. The Zabrak, too, had a slightly higher than normal midichlorian count, but not high enough to make him Force-sensitive. How different it had been to observe the behavior of the Zabrak's midichlorians compared with those of Darth Tenebris only 2 days earlier. The Jedi routinely performed blood tests to verify the midichlorian counts of prospective trainees, but Plagueis had passed beyond the need for such crude measurements. He could not only sense the strength of the Force in another, but also perceive the midichlorians that individualized forceful beings. It was that dark-side ability that had allowed generations of Sith to locate and initiate recruits. The dispersal of midichlorians at the moment of physical death was, for lack of a better term, inexorable. Analogous to his fated confrontation with the Wobegon crew, the moment of death appeared to be somehow fixed in space and time. According to his Sith education, since Captain La and the others had been in some sense dead from the moment Plagueis' gaze had alighted on the freighter, it followed that the midichlorians that resided in alleged symbiosis with them must have been preparing to be subsumed into the reservoir of life energy that was the Force, long before Plagueis had stowed away. His attempts to save them, to prolong that state of symbiosis, were comparable to using a sponge to dam a raging river. And yet the Sith Lords of old were said to have been able to draw on the energies released during death to extend their own lives, as well as the lives of others. Unfortunately, much like the technique of essence transfer, that ancient knowledge had been lost. Feeling the ship revert to real space, Plagueis rose from the bunk, dressed, and walked forward. Stepping over the corpses sprawled in the main cabin, the deck plates awash in fire-suppressant fluid and blackening pools of blood, and through passageways reeking of death. One of the crew members, the now one-armed Dressalian, was still alive but comatose. In the ship's undermount cockpit, the droid stood motionless at the control console. Beyond the transparasteel viewport, myriad stars hung in space.
Sir, we are approaching the coordinates supplied by your comlink.
The droid said without turning from the view. Plagueis settled into the pilot's chair, which barely accommodated his long body. How do you come to be aboard the Wobegon, droid?
Formerly, I served the needs of a medical facility on Obroa Sky.
In what capacity?
Research, in addition to performing a wide range of surgeries on beings of diverse species.
Plagueis regarded the droid. Thus, your many appendages.
Yes, sir, but the ones I wear currently were retrofitted when I became the property of Captain La, so that I might better serve the needs of the Wobegon.
And how did you become the captain's property?
I believe, sir, that I was awarded to Captain La in place of payments due for the receipt of certain merchandise. It is also my belief that the exchange was meant to be temporary.
But Captain La decided to keep you.
Yes, sir. She decided to keep me. I'm sorry to say that I am at a loss to explain her reasons, and I never presume to ask.
That is fine. That's a good quality in a droid.
I understand how it could be, sir.
Tell me, droid, what is the possible consequence of low thyloxin levels in a pound? 114D didn't hesitate.
One possible consequence would be an elevation of the oxidation rate, leading to the growth of an exophthalmic goiter, which in turn would affect the production of roamin from the anterior lobes of the luteary gland.
And?
One result might be giantism, well beyond the power norm.
If so?
The connecting ganglia making up the autonomic nervous system and controlling glandular secretion might induce an acceleration of the circular sphincter muscles of the digestive tract, resulting in xerophthalmia.
So you are a diagnostician as well?
In a minor capacity, sir.
Beyond the viewport, growing larger against the backdrop of a behemoth-ringed planet, a space station turned in fixed orbit near a heavily cratered moon. A hodgepodge of interconnected domed modules, the station featured two long, boxy arms to which ships of varying size were tethered. Plagueis called data to the display screen of his comlink and placed it in view of 114D. Transmit this code over the comm. The droid performed the task and waited for the comm while the cockpit enunciators cracked the light. Unidentified freighter. Deep space demo and removal is in reception of your request. Give us a moment to authenticate your transmission. Holding fast while you authenticate, Plagueis said. Freighter, you are cleared for docking. The voice returned a moment later. My ship, Plagueis said, leaning forward to hold the yoke. As a precaution, the station directed them to a berth at the distal end of the larger of the two arms. You will accompany me into the landing bay, Plagueis told the droid when he had shut the ship down. Raise the boarding ramp behind us and activate the anti-intrusion system. No one is to board the Wobegon unless I say otherwise.
I understand, sir.
Waiting in the gloomy landing bay were a female Nikto and a russet-colored young male Dug, backed by a motley contingent of armed beings. Lowering the cowl of his robe as he approached, Plagueis saw the Nikto stiffen and signal those behind her to leave the area immediately.
Magister Damask, she began in basic. I had no foreknowledge.
Plagueis cut her off. This isn't a social call.
Of course, Magister. Regardless, do you wish me to apprise Boss Cabra of your visit?
Is he on station?
No, sir, but he can be reached by comm.
That won't be necessary, Plagueis said. I'll contact him myself.
As you wish, Magister. What services can the station provide?
Plagueis gestured in an offhanded way to the berthed freighter. This ship is to be sealed and flagged.
Without salvaging anything?
Dug said. Plagueis looked at him. I said sealed and slagged. Do you need to hear it a third time? The Dug bared his teeth.
Do you know who you're talking to, Mune?
Plagueis cut his eyes to the Nikto. Who is this callow pup?
Pup,
the Dug repeated before the Nikto could intervene.
Boss Cabra's youngest progeny, Magister, she said quickly, restraining the Dug with her extended left arm. He means no disrespect.
Plagueis regarded the Dug again.
What are you called, pup?
The Dug's rear legs were tensed for a leap, but the Nikto whirled rapidly, slapping him across his flued and broad-nostrilled snout and clamping a hand on his windpipe.
Answer him,
She bellowed into his snarling face.
and with due respect.
The Dug relented and whimpered, though certainly more out of humiliation than pain.
Donada!
He squeaked at last. Darnada, Plagueis repeated before addressing the Nikto. Perhaps young Darnada should be muzzled to prevent him from endangering his father's business relationships.
His rashness reflects his inexperience, Magister.
The Nikto said in abject apology. She gave Darnada a menacing glance before continuing.
Trust that your orders regarding the ship will be honored in full, Magister.
I will also need a change of wardrobe and a fueled piloted ship.
Can we provide the pilot with a destination beforehand?
Munilist.
Of course, Magister. And what are your instructions regarding the droid?
Instructions.
Is the droid to be slagged along with the ship?
Plagueis looked over his shoulder at 114D. How much of your memory can be wiped without tampering with your medical protocols?
I'm modularly designed. My memory storage can be erased in its entirety, or according to whatever parameters you establish.
Plagueis considered that. Remain with the ship until it has been liquefied. I will expect a complete audio-vid recording. 114D raised its right side appendages in a gesture of acknowledgement.
At your service, Magister Damask.
Chapter 5. Homecoming. Those fortunate enough to have visited Munilist in the decades preceding the Clone Wars often remarked that the planet had been blessed with the most beautiful skies in the galaxy. To maintain that pristine blue realm, to prevent it from being sullied by drop ships, shuttles, or landing craft, the Munes had erected the most costly skyhook of its kind anywhere outside the core. As efficient as it was luxurious, the skyhook, known affectionately as the financial funnel, linked the orbital city of High Port with the planetary capital, Arnavon, which functioned as the nerve center of the intergalactic banking clan. While the stately towers seemed to speak to the Mune's high regard for aesthetics and ecology, its true purpose was to keep visitors from setting foot on Munilist, thereby safeguarding the planet's wealth of resources and keeping secret the lavish lifestyles of those who had ascended to the top of the food chain. From its remote corner of the Outer Rim, Munilist exerted its influence across all of known space and halfway to the galaxy's nearest satellite star cluster. Dating back to the founding of the Republic, the banking clan had funded governments, supported settlements, and bankrolled countless commerce guilds, trade corporations, and shipping cartels. In a very real sense, the IBC dictated the ebb and flow of wealth from the core to the outer rim. Scarcely a building was raised on Coruscant without the banking clan's approval. Scarcely a starship left the yards of Karat or Belgringi or Fondor without the IBC having brokered the deal. And scarcely an election occurred on Corellia or Commodore without the Munes having been consulted. The Munes accomplished all these things with a meticulous serenity that belied the frenzied workings of their mathematical minds. Save for when it came to collecting on overdue debts, the Munes, on first acquaintance, appeared to be a stolid and lenient species, if somewhat arrogant, with an ascetic nature that was in full keeping with their willowy bodies and was reflected in the simple but harmonious architecture of their cities. As pale as the Munes themselves, Highport's Space Center incorporated the design elements they favored most: domed interiors, arch-topped windows, fluted columns, and unadorned friezes and entablatures. Among these faux stone building blocks, large groups of Munes maneuvered and mingled with unhurried, single-minded purpose, maintaining a conversational clamor that struck some visitors as reminiscent of the spoken language of thinking machines. Attending them were droids of all variety, and guest workers from the nearby worlds of Beskane, Jameis, Intrala, and others. On any given day, a visitor might spy envoys from Yagai, Gravlex Ned, or Kali, along with huts of the Drixo or Proga kin. But what one saw most, in overwhelming numbers, were members of the banking clan. Financiers, accountants, lawyers, dressed in their signatory palo fiduciary garb. Form-fitting green trousers and boots, round-collared green tunics, and flare-shouldered green cloaks. Some were accompanied by retinues of squat, dark-skinned, flat-nosed soldiers from the planet Iota, sporting garish body armor and carrying ceremonial weapons. That day, cutting through the verdant sea like some predatory sea creature, came a wedge-shaped cluster of mules dressed in black cloaks and skullcaps, guarded by a contingent of tow-headed Ichani warriors, whose silver eyes darted vigilantly, and whose metallic bodysuits masked the translucency of their skin. At the leading edge of the wedge marched an elder mule with a whiskered chin and stooped shoulders, who was making directly for Highport's customs control station, where Higo Damask, as Plagueis was known to everyone in late North Teneris, and 114D were waiting, amid a contingent of security personnel.
We came as soon as Highport Immigration notified us, Marsh Hill said. If you had contacted us from deep space demolition, we could have sent a ship, rather than have to rely on Boss Cabra's specious hospitality.
No one seems to believe that I'm capable of finding my own way home, Damask said. Hill's long face wrinkled.
I don't understand.
It's not important that you do. Suffice it to say that your dispatching a ship would only have resulted in further delay. Like Hill and his coterie of half a dozen, Damask's hairless head was encased in a tight-fitting bonnet, and the hem of his black coat swept the polished floor.
You were expected days ago,
Hill said with a note of exasperation. Events of an unforeseen nature prevented me from returning earlier.
A successful journey, nevertheless, I assume?
Assume correctly.
Hill relaxed somewhat. We shouldn't tarry here any longer than necessary. Transport is waiting.
At Hill's gesture, the black-cloaked mules began to angle toward the skyhook turbolifts. 4 of